Welcome to the show. I'm Nicole Fröhlich. The U.S. president has sent a message of support to protesters in Iran as the government continues a violent crackdown on nationwide protests. Writing on his Truth Social platform, Donald Trump called the protesters patriots and urged them to take over the country's institutions. He added that those committing violence against demonstrators would pay a big price. He called the killing of protesters senseless and said help is on its way without elaborating on what he meant by that. Activists say the death toll from the demonstrations has now reached at least 2,000 people. It's a figure that dwarfs previous reports about those killed in the violence. The White House says U.S. airstrikes on Iran remain on the table as a response to the repression. Here in Europe, several countries, including Germany and France, have summoned their Iranian ambassadors. A concerted diplomatic effort seems to be underway. I spoke to Hanna Neumann, an MEP for the Greens and the chair of the European Parliament's Delegation for relations with Iran, and asked her what the EU's game plan is for Iran.
Good evening from Brussels, where I think everyone at the moment is trying to see how we can clearly show solidarity with the people in the streets of Iran, and at the same time send very clear messages to the regime that the violence that we see is outrageous and it's unacceptable. I think that's why they called in the ambassadors. I think given what we learn more and more, despite the blackout, I mean, there's still some information going out. We will need more of a response than just calling in ambassadors.
Calls for additional sanctions, for example, are growing louder. In your opinion, what kind of sanctions could really make a difference here?
So first of all, we need to finally put the Revolutionary Guard on the terror list. They're terrorizing their own people. That's what we see again right now. And they're terrorizing a whole region. I mean, there's no single conflict in the Middle East where Iran is not escalating, where the Revolutionary Guards are not escalating. So we need to finally put them on the sanctions list. And I don't have any understanding whatsoever for the countries, for the European Union countries that stop that. We also need to see additional targeted sanctions against bodies that are now involved beyond the Revolutionary Guard in these violations. But I actually also think it is time to expel ambassadors and ambassadorial personnel from the European Union, because they are clearly misusing their diplomatic privileges for transnational repression, so for repressing Iranian diaspora here and for sending out their propaganda while they block all communication tools for Iranians inside. This regime is clearly showing at the moment that they have no interest in dialogue. So why should we still continue to give them this preferential access to the European Union?
I would like to zoom in on something that you mentioned at the beginning of your last answer there. You would like to see the Iranian Revolutionary Guard listed as a terror organization. That has been a controversial topic among EU member states for a really long time. Do you get the sense now that that is changing in light of what's happening in the country?
As I said, I have no understanding whatsoever for countries that still block that. I hope that the large majority of countries will be in favor of the listing finally now. And if there are one or two that continue to block, that could be the case, for example, with Hungary. I want Kaja Kallas to be very open about which countries are blocking, so that the population in these countries can then address their governments, because I don't think citizens in the European Union, no matter from which country, would have an understanding for their governments blocking this step. So I really think we need to unlock it now, and maybe this can only happen by publicly shaming the member states that behind closed doors block this.
I'm sure you're aware also of the pressure Donald Trump is exerting on the regime. He wrote in a post on social media that help was on its way. Do you know what he means?
I think nobody knows what he means. And given his track record just of the last few days when it comes to Iran, it is very difficult to get an idea, because one day he says he's going to negotiate with the regime whilst people want to see the regime gone. Then this morning he announced higher tariffs on countries that circumvent the sanctions, the UN sanctions on Iran, which I actually think was a pretty smart step. And then he says now help is on his way and take the institutions, as if it were that easy to take the institutions. Believe me, protesters would have done that already if it were that easy. So just saying help is on his way and leaving everybody in the dark of what that means also creates, I have to say, some skepticism and some fear here. So I hope we will find out soon. And I really, really hope for the protesters and in the streets and for all Iranians that he has carefully thought through whatever he is up to.
It sounds like the EU is not coordinating its response with the US to this crisis at all.
Well, Trump is not coordinating with anyone. I would clearly point the finger to the White House here.
In your opinion, what is the single most important thing the EU can do right now to help the people in Iran demanding basic human rights?
I think we have to be very clear towards the regime that we don't accept this, and we need to take all steps necessary to make that even clearer, including, as I said, expelling the ambassadors, putting the Revolutionary Guard on the terror list, and fully enforcing the UN sanctions also for our own companies, including third country sanctions circumvention, and be very clear that we stand united also in supporting the different opposition groups and figures by publicly meeting them and making very clear that in our perspective, this regime has really lost it, and there is no way for the people in this regime to return to normal, so that hopefully some high-level members of this regime who, for example, still enjoy traveling to the European Union or sending their children here, they may reconsider if they really want to uphold this to the very end, or if maybe it may be smarter to defect and bring down this regime.
Hanna Neumann, chair of the European Parliament's Delegation for Relations with Iran. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as we heard there, Germany has summoned Iran's ambassador over the protest crackdown. Chancellor Friedrich Merz says the regime has lost all legitimacy.
If a regime can only keep itself in power by force, then it's effectively at an end. I believe we are now seeing the final days and weeks of this regime. It has, in any case, no legitimacy through democratic elections. The population is now rising up against this regime. I hope there is a possibility to end this conflict peacefully.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Simon Young. Simon, Chancellor Merz's assessment on the situation in Iran is quite clear. What do you make of it?
Yeah, the Chancellor says that we may be witnessing the last days and weeks of the Iranian regime. But of course, he can't know that for sure. It depends in large part on what other pressure is brought against the regime, and in particular on whether President Trump might be willing to take decisive action to oust the regime ultimately. But at the moment, he seems more inclined to talk to the leadership and negotiate with them despite the violence against their own people. But of course, I think it's right when Friedrich Merz says that this violence against the Iranian protests is a sign of weakness. And that is why Chancellor Merz has been condemning the killing and saying that he wants to do everything to see a political change in Iran. Now, meanwhile, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said on X that he thinks Germany should end its unlawful interference in our region, as he put it. And he said that, Germany was not in a good position to talk about human rights. He said that Germany's credibility had been severely reduced as a result of Germany's support for Israel during the Gaza war. So a direct response, really, and a pushback against the German position.
Germany is one of a number of European countries to summon its Iranian ambassador. What do you expect to be Berlin's next move here?
Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, summoning the ambassador is a relatively severe, if symbolic, diplomatic move. It just says, that the Berlin's government's position is clear. Britain and France have taken the same kind of line. The German Foreign Ministry said it was shocked shocked by the brutality of the regime and called on them to end the repression. Well, Foreign Minister Wadefuhl said yesterday that he thought, as you've already mentioned, that it would be a good idea to increase sanctions against the Iranian regime and also to declare the Iranian Revolutionary Guards a terror organisation, that declaration should happen in the EU. It's been under discussion for years but hasn't happened yet. What that would do would reduce their ability to access funding, for instance, as well in the European Union, and again, and obviously that would limit their activities. So all these things are in play at the moment, but it's unclear ultimately whether Berlin or any other individual European government can actually take the decisive action that will make a difference in Iran on the ground.
CW political correspondent Simon Young. Thanks, Simon.